For our final session together, uh, we're going to think about setting free, joyfully doing what is ours to do, adapting as conditions change, doing so with those who wish to join us without judging others who do not choose to join us. Uh, as I was working on this book, I kept thinking about Tolkien and his Lord of the Rings opus. In many ways, Tolkien was the 20th century's novelist of doom. I mean, the central geographical figure in Middle Earth is Mount Doom, and of course, for a man whose life spanned two world wars and horrible atrocities of those two world wars, um, it's no wonder that he would see and feel the intensity of doom. There's one scene in The Two Towers where Sam says to Frodo, "Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I understand, Frodo. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." And I think this is one of the things that we will see happening. We'll see people become so depressed and so discouraged and so cynical that they'll be tempted to give up and to go for the least of what human beings can be. But we'll need people like Sam to remind us what we're holding on to. There's some good in this world. Um, at another time, Frodo says in The Fellowship of the Ring, he says to Gandalf, "I wish all this didn't have to happen in my time." "So do I," said Gandalf, "and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." And that, I think, is what begins to emerge for us in this phase of the process. We let go, we let be, we let come, and then at some point we feel we're set free. We aren't living with our old assumptions of what civilization's supposed to be, about what Christianity is supposed to be. We've been set free, and now we have the freedom to say, what do I want to do? How do I want to live? One of my great loves in life is fly fishing, and I was out in the American West fly fishing on a beautiful river called the Bitterroot River. This is just one little braid of the stream and part of the Bitterroot Valley. And I came upon this beautiful ponderosa pine tree. If you've never been to the American West, ponderosa pines are just these magical trees. You just smell them. They have this beautiful scent, and they're just such lovely trees. And I came upon this tree at the edge of the Bitterroot River. It was obvious what had happened. The river, big floods come through, and part of and the river bed moves across the valley and braids into different substreams. And this little braid has been wearing away the soil underneath the roots of this tree for some years now. But the tree is still standing strong. And I was impressed by this beautiful tree. It didn't do anything wrong. You can't say, what did that tree do wrong to be in this mess? It just survived. It's just stayed alive. It's doing what a tree should do. But the conditions now, it happens to be alive at a time when one too many floods happened that washed away this part of the river. And what does that tree need to do now? Well, it needs to do two things. First, it needs to survive as long as it can. It needs to keep those roots on the landward side strong. And it needs to keep enjoying the sunshine and the rain. It needs to keep living as long as it can. But second thing it needs to do, as never before, it needs to invest more and more of its energy in those little pine cones and the little seeds, ponderosa pine seeds that they hold. Because the great privilege of this tree now is to sow the seeds for future generations of ponderosa pines. And this fourth part of the book, I built around 4 chapters, or I'm sorry, 5 chapters. First, beauty abounds. We have to keep appreciating the beauty, the gift of life, the joy that's there. It's so easy to become doomy and gloomy and stop appreciating the beauty that surrounds us, to become so morose and despondent that, well, we need Sam to remind us there's so much good left in the world. Um, and my goodness, brothers and sisters, suddenly all those verses in the Bible written to people in very hard times to rejoice in the Lord always, to be sure to keep the feasts of Thanksgiving, to keep that joy and celebration going, even in the worst of times, to understand that joy is part of our resistance to the evil in the world. That chapter is very, very important. Second, what a time to be alive. Look, if you wanted to be born in an easy time, you could have picked some better times. But if you wanted to be born in a time that matters, in a time of meaning, you showed up right on time. Our lives really count for a lot in these coming years, and this is a great time for us to invest our lives in things that really matter. Third, tell them about the dream. Recounts the story when Dr. Martin Luther King gave his most famous speech. It was a time when things were terrible for his people, and he was facing the worst in American history and culture and ethos. But he dared to speak about a dream. And at these times, we can become preoccupied with doom. But if we're wise, no, this is the time to talk about the dream. What kind of life would we like to see develop on the other side of this readjustment, this reorganization that we're in? And then for each of us to find what is ours to do and to do what is ours to do and to understand that somebody else might not be ready to do what we're ready to do. We might not be ready to do what somebody else is ready to do. So each of us does what's ours to do without needing to criticize other people for not doing just what I'm doing or we're doing. And then to understand that this is a path we're going to make by walking, and we'll do what makes sense now. And if something better comes along tomorrow, we'll do that tomorrow. For you, as you ponder this process together, you might ask, what are the greatest threats to joy among us? What are habits that we have that where we sabotage our own joy? That's really worth thinking about. Uh, Joy, it's so ironic. After writing this book, the hardest book I've ever written, the book that deals with the most painful subjects I've ever had to deal with, and I've dealt with some painful ones if you've been following my work. I finished the book and was talking to a dear friend of mine, and he said, "How are you holding up? I'm sure this wasn't easy." I said, "It's strange to tell you this, but I feel this deep joy. Telling the truth, seeing the truth has unleashed in me a deep joy. And I feel now like never before, I want to try to articulate the dream of what we need in the future." Uh, and you might ask, when you wonder about finding and shining your own light, what comes to mind? What comes to mind right now? And realize you might do that for a year or 2 years, and then it'll be time for something else. But what comes to mind right now? And you might just return to that image of that ponderosa pine tree, half of its roots out into midair, um, and ask yourself what that image says to you. It might say something different to each of you, but this might be a good time to just let that image speak to you. And I'll close by just giving us a few moments to ponder that image and what it might say to us today. Thank you, everyone. God bless you all. I hope this has been a fruitful time of reflection for you. I'm so grateful for your group, for your leadership, for your voice. Uh, we need you. Uh, and may you continue to find your light and shine it. Thanks.